question that I get asked all the time in questions, comments, by the way, question, comment below, is what does a good interview look like? And that's what this is. This is a good interview, but here's what makes it interesting. This week's candidate is a product manager, specifically targeting the leadership principle of customer obsession. Pretty standard stuff for a product manager to be able to do this. However, and here's what makes this specific candidate so interesting. They were under-leveling themselves. They presented as a, we'll call it L6 product manager. And what became obvious throughout the course of the interview was this was not an L6 product manager. This was a mid-career, borderline, kind of making their way toward director level candidate. And their answers were just really good. But here's some things to watch out for. For those of you who are new here and don't know who I am, well, I'm a former executive at Microsoft, Amazon, Oracle, a handful of startups. This is basically what I did. Hired teams, right? The more senior you get, this is all you do is hire teams. And I want to help people land their dream job. First and foremost, how even when you have, let's be honest, bad structure in your answer, you can still overperform. Structure is not the end all be all of getting you the job. It certainly helps in storytelling. And I hammer on this point all the time. Structure, 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 be a good storyteller. But in this case, woof, the structure was not great. I was rereading some of my notes on this candidate who I absolutely loved, but man, the structure was just bad. They were still able to not only overcome that, but also demonstrate to me that they were in fact higher level than what they were interviewing for. 2, sometimes your better answer is what you said and didn't realize you said it. And one of the things I really like to point out is that, mock interviews are great to help you understand what you're doing well in your interview and how you show up. And especially if you haven't interviewed for a long time or certainly haven't interviewed outside your company, you really don't know how you're showing up. You're like, I interview tens, hundreds of people for jobs all the time. I hire all the time. I know how to do a good interview. Yeah, running a good interview is not the same as performing well in a good interview. And sometimes it's helpful to go back and look at the tape, which, we make the videos available to all of our customers. It's helpful for them to be able to go back and look and see how that progressed. But also sometimes you pick up little things like, man, this was a much better answer and you didn't even realize it. And finally, for those of you who've been watching these videos for a long time, you know that I love to talk about metrics, data. Metrics, data always helps an answer, specifically for product managers, but it's always going to help improve your answers, and that's on display here. In the now close to well over 300 of these mock interviews that we've done, what I've seen again and again is preparation helps. It definitely helps, but being able to just go through the tape of your mock interview massively helps and improves your ability to land your dream job. And in this case, we have a product manager who's targeting a job at Amazon and actually got a higher level job offer than what they were originally targeting. As with all the videos on this channel, what we do is we play back a mock interview in its entirety, and I will jump in from time to time with commentary.
Part of being a great product manager is, playing the role of Gandalf, right? You kind of conjure stuff up out of nowhere and surprise. Huh?
I point my staff into the right direction.
Exactly.
This is a little thing that this candidate did here, and I want to highlight it because it's important. Having banter, being able to go back and forth and make the interview feel less like a high stress situation, less like a interrogation, super important. I made clearly a nerdy joke, right? Referencing Lord of the Rings in a job interview. Like that, it's been a little bit of my nerddom is coming out. The candidate matched that energy. She got it, she played it back, and it kind of relieves that tension. Remember, just like in sales, people want to buy from people they like. People want to work with people they like. And if you can have that back and forth banter in an interview, whether it's reflecting nerddom or sports references, whatever it is that you can latch onto in an interview and reflect it back in a way that's authentic and genuine, please make sure that that's the case. It absolutely helps when you're going through your interview to have that match in a conversational way appear.
And you sometimes get the opportunity to peek around the corner and build something that, a customer didn't necessarily know they needed or wanted, couldn't have verbalized, but when you delivered it, they were delighted. What comes to mind when you think about your biggest win in that regard?
Sure. So, the first thing is how to identify those wins, right? Is you want to develop sort of like a practice that you have the opportunity to grab those wherever possible. And I think the way that I put myself and my team in the position to do that is a very, very deep understanding of the customer, who they are, what they need, what's important to them, what are their short-term and long-term goals. If you're selling to a business, what is organizationally impacting decision making, things like that. Same with technology. So, right, with regard to engineering design, what's possible, how are things built, what's easy, what's hard. Obviously, that's always their call, but understanding the architecture well enough to know how things are developed and understand, like, logically where things can be added easily versus not, or where deficiencies are, what needs to be covered for that. So yeah, and then also in the context of the long-term goals of the business and financial metrics and things like that, and targets that we're looking to hit and why, and how that breaks down into the financial statement of like EBITDA versus revenue and margins and things like that. So I try overall to be incredibly knowledgeable about all of those things on an ongoing basis, so that when it comes time to making a decision that we have the opportunity to delight the customer, I can sort of make that call. So an example would be when working most recently at UTech, I led the product team there. I was responsible ultimately for around $250 million in revenue. I had a team of 9 people. We set the direction for another 75 in engineering, design, and QA. And we had a retail technology platform that served some of the largest retailers in the US, primarily focused around grocery. So this was a platform that, among other things, again, sort of, it was like B2B2C, where we had brands creating like advertising, promotions, coupons for application at various retailers. So our retail customers were calling our APIs in order to get data for the promotions and displaying that on their website for their customers. Their shoppers were then logging in. We were returning a relevancy algorithm in order to sort the promotions in the right order. The customer would click on, let's say, a coupon. That would be added to their loyalty card. They would go to the store, fill their cart, go to the checkout. At checkout, the cashier would scan all the items, and then point of sale would call our platform APIs with the basket. We would return back what the promotions were and apply them, and which ones should be applied to that basket within 50 milliseconds, because that's the requirement that our customers require in order to ensure like a good customer experience within the lane. And then the customer would check out, they would get their discount, like 50 cents off milk or whatever, and then proceed on to, go to the mobile app again and check for more promotions. So all of that infrastructure was.
Hold on.
Oh yeah.
That one, you threw me for a bit there at the end, which is I'm at the point of sale, I scan my cart, I pay, presumably I'm leaving. Why would I go back to check for more things?
Just the next time you go back.
The next time you're in the store. Okay. Sorry. I was procedurally considering that you going back in the store to look for stuff. Okay.
No. Yeah.
Okay. So we're still going through the first kind of opening stanza of this candidate's answer. And in the context of kind of situation, task, right, action, result, the STAR format for an answer, still very much in the situation, a little bit into the task, but there's a lot of words here. And it's not important that the interviewer be an expert at your job to be able to evaluate if you're good at your job. And this is very much a case where customer obsession is pouring through. The candidate is able to talk at length of like the needs of the customer, what they want, how they're trying to make the product. All of that is great, fantastic. It's a bit much. I'm not going to use the word extra because it's not over the top, but it definitely could use with some editing to help the interviewer process what's going on. Because even someone like myself who had worked in a marginally tangential space, so I kind of understood what was needing to be accomplished here, I had to interrupt and ask questions about like, well, what's actually happening here? Here's what happens when an interviewer has to ask those questions. They're playing catch up. They lose the track of what you're saying. They're no longer paying attention to the content of what you're saying because they're trying to stitch together in their mind what's actually happening here. And when that happens, the really good stuff is slipping through, right? I know what one of my follow-up questions is here, and I had written it down because I take good notes when I do these mock interviews, but a really key piece of information got dropped in here and almost went unnoticed because there was just so much noise around this answer. And so that's just something when you're thinking about preparing your answers, There is no amount of time that you should speak in an answer, right? Your answer should only be as long as they need to be and not one word longer. But you do have to consider whether or not, if you were providing this answer to your boss at your current job or whichever company you were at when you perform this task, would they say to you, yeah, speed up, I already know all this, right? Because in some ways, that's their senior level management way of telling you, hey, you need to summarize this better and get me better informed.
Yeah, just the next time you go back. So the situation is, so prior to having this opportunity to build this feature, right, that's how our system worked. And there is a huge desire from brands, right, to be able to identify and target customers in order to nudge them to purchase just a little bit more of their product. And the industry standard with regard to ability to target these types of promotions was like lo-fi, right? Like it was not very elegant. It was very, we'll look at data from a month ago or 6 months ago and identify this group of user in spreadsheets that will then, remove segments from, and then be able to sell this to a brand. They'll be able to okay it, purchase it next month. The data needs to be all run again to be updated for, the past month. And then it'll be created in the system and flow through to the retailer.
Going back to my last point. That was a lot of words to basically walk through a pretty archaic, highly manual, and somewhat broken, the candidate used the words, I think she said lo-fi, right? Low fidelity process. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of words. Are they all necessary to communicate that she was making something dramatically better for her customers?
So that's what existed. Based on our architecture and our integrations point, we had the opportunity to create essentially real-time targeting, so that rather than have to do all of this data analysis, which involved teams of people and was very static in its ability to create and deploy, we had the ability to read the data from the point of sale as the transaction completed, and then process it, and in near real time allow a brand to essentially create a promotion where users could drop into the targeted segment, like even throughout the month, as they met the purchase requirement for that segment. And I can just give an example of what that is if the kind of value wasn't clear. Essentially moving from—
No, I understand. I get it.
Okay.
No.
Yeah. So obviously that increases both the amount of money that brands want to spend, and it increases the efficacy of their promotions. So it increases their ROI. And so knowing this, we created this feature. Of course, in this instance, right, while the money is coming from brands for these promotions, our customers and the people that we're pitching are the retailers, because they're the ones who like sign up with us as a technology partner, and their sites call our API and their point of sale calls our platform. And so no one asked for this feature, right? Everyone sort of said, oh, it would be like great if this could happen, but it's too hard of a technology problem to solve and da da da. But we were able to build it. And so when we went in and pitched to retailers, this was a key differentiator in, how we could enable them to create a promotions network and leverage brand dollars to the benefit of their customers. And so we went from, almost like winning, 0% of sales. It wasn't that low. It's like under 10% of like our at bats did we actually close the customer, to like over 60% in the span of like 3 years. And then, we also got the opportunity to pitch Walmart, who we closed from a desire perspective, but I believe it's still tied up in legal for the last 6 months. But we were chosen as their preferred technology provider for this functionality, in part based on that feature.
So again, I want to highlight a couple things here. The candidate is clearly a high performing product manager, right? That high degree of customer obsession, really understands what they needed, not doing a great job at communicating, right? The structure is just not there. There is no logical beginning, middle, and an end to this discussion. The highlight points, if I were to take back what I just heard and try to regurgitate it back and defend this person in the room, I would be able to highlight there was a need for wanting to win higher share of wallet for sellers in grocery stores. Grocery stores were their customers, and they wanted, as a provider to their customers, the grocery stores, to provide a solution that would do rapid customer segmentation based on point of sale data to then auto-generate promotions based on qualification metrics for those customers and do it in near real time, 50 milliseconds was the number the candidate used, to then increase sales over time with those customers, increase share of basket, share of wallet over time based on more targeted promotions. Okay. I did that in a lot less time than this candidate was able to communicate all that, because there was just so much background material. And this is almost a case of caring too much about your customers and just wanting to share everything. Like, this is so cool. I loved working on it. That passion will come through. If you have high customer obsession, that passion will come through. So don't worry about that. But what the risk here is, and this is what's critically important for customers who are watching these videos and trying to understand how you can perform better in your interviews, is there was just a lot of words. And so I, as the interviewer, the cognitive load on me to try and parse all of this, unless I do this a lot and I really care about this person in front of me, if I'm a busy mid-level manager who's assisting on a loop for some other team that's trying to hire somebody that I don't know how badly they need to hire this person, but it's not my problem because I've got all these other things I worry about. They may just tune out. And you, as the candidate, end up losing out because of unforced errors. And in this particular case, just bad structure, right? And just not doing a great job of stitching together an answer and presenting it in a way that makes it easier for me as the interviewer to defend you in the room when the assessment meeting happens.
So that 50 millisecond requirement, it's oddly specific, and in my humble opinion, a very tight time window for what you were actually accomplishing and where, meaning a point of sale device in the middle of a grocery store. Do you think that was an appropriate metric, or like what are your thoughts on that metric?
I want to get at why I asked this question. When you are a product manager in tech, specifically a product manager in tech, one of the key roles that you fulfill is being able to call BS on the engineering teams, right? Understanding enough about the stack and enough about the technology that's being deployed to be able to challenge not only assessments, but assertions about what needs to be true. And kind of the other side of that is then also being able to state, we have this requirement. This is a hard, fixed requirement that we must meet, and I believe we can meet because I understand X, Y, and Z, or I've done more work here, blah, blah, blah. I've met with the engineering team. But you have to be able to defend certain decisions. And part of that requires being technical in nature. There's certainly some PM jobs in tech that don't require this level of technical precision. But in this specific case where you're building basically what amounts to a real-time bidding system, it's super important. And 50 milliseconds is fast, right? So in asking this question, it was oddly specific. I wanted to see if the candidate could defend the number, but also give me a more kind of circumspect discussion around the technology and the decisioning that went into that.
Yeah, so to clarify, the 50 millisecond requirement was the response time for the callback. You send us the basket and we send you what promotions are applicable.
Yep, I get it.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, so the processing of the data and the targeting, it happened not over 50 milliseconds. It happened in the background. And like I said, was in sort of near real time, but not meeting that 50 millisecond because the point of sale didn't need that information. But the reason our customers, so the 50 millisecond was provided as a requirement for one of our customers, and we rolled it out across the board and made it an SLA for all of our customers. And the reason being is that you have customers that are waiting in the lane, right, in order to check out. And like their in-lane experience is a huge part of their grocery shopping. And if they have to wait, in order to understand which coupons are going to be applied, or like which loyalty points they're getting credit for, then it creates a bad experience for everyone. And if you look at the volume of transactions that are being processed at a retailer's every hour, right? Even just an increase of a couple of seconds of waiting for a receipt to print it's going to matter, like at that volume, right? And so it was a requirement that came from a customer. We met it for one customer, and then once we met it for that customer, we made sure that it was consistent across the board. And I think it was a valid requirement.
This is okay. I absolutely loved this candidate, and I remember at the time thinking, my goodness, their mind as a product manager is fantastic. In this, the answer that she gives, where she starts and she says, well, it came from the customers, 50 milliseconds. The answer got away from her a little bit, right? And the right answer, which she eventually gets to, but doesn't do so with confidence, is our customers, the grocery chains, our customers care deeply about their in-lane experience. And they don't want to add delays that could, over time, add up to seconds or minutes in the processing of customers coming through and checking out, doing checkout, whether it's the checker who's working in the store, who's running the items through, or self-checkout lanes, which we now see more and more in grocery stores. But anything that adds to that processing time that creates a worse experience for the person in the checkout line, specifically the people waiting in line to have their items checked, right? That right there was the ball game, right? This 50 millisecond time window, it seems very small and inconsequential, right? Because if you have 20 items that each have 50 milliseconds, you're talking about literally a second, right? So it's not, but what will come out later, because I've read ahead in my notes and I remember this from the discussion, I remember thinking to myself, no, this is an oddly specific number, right? And yes, over a large number of transactions and lines, whatever, it can add up to a lot, but it came from a customer. Why? Great, she got to it a little bit, which is, they're concerned about the customer experience, but why? And so I'm going to press on it, right? She doesn't do a great job of focusing on the right answer. And even when she presents the right answer, it doesn't do so with confidence. So it feels a little wishy-washy. So I'm going to press. As an interviewer, I'm going to press to really understand what's going on here.
I guess I'm going to poke on that a little bit, right? So you could have doubled it to say 100 milliseconds, right? Which puts potentially a very different set of strains on your system. And certainly in terms of your SLAs, your ability to meet your SLAs with your customers, being the retailers. But the perception difference of 50 milliseconds to 100 milliseconds to a customer in a lane is almost impossible for them to perceive, right? So I'd really like to just kind of poke just a little bit more on why roll out this 50 millisecond SLA to your entire customer base, knowing, presumably, that you were basically handcuffing yourself in terms of your performance expectations that you were setting with all of the other customers who didn't ask for this.
Sure. Okay. So I can clarify a couple things. For customers that
it is always okay to correct the interviewer. If they ask a bad question, if they have bad assumptions, if they state something that is not in line with what you know to be true, it's perfectly acceptable. In fact, encourage, say, hey, let me clarify a few things. The job of the interview is to determine if you, the candidate, can do this job at this company and exceed expectations. Being able to push back, even as someone who is perceived as more senior to you, and say, hey, let me just clarify a few things because I'm not sure you quite got that right. Totally expected, in fact, encouraged. Do more of that.
Didn't request it. We didn't update their SLAs in order to give it to them. It was a requirement of the system when it was like a performance requirement across the board of the system that wasn't necessarily customer facing for existing customers. The reason that it needed to be a performance requirement for the rest of the system, in more detail, is that so the way that you pitch retailers, or the way that we pitch retailers in order to sign up for their to be their technology provider in this instance, is essentially they have like a checklist of requirements that they've developed And then in some cases, they put out a formal RFP. In other cases, they invite you in to have a conversation. But they have specific requirements that are kind of created internally, where you need to meet in order to be considered for one of the technology partners that they're going to work with. So, in this instance, being able to say that you have a 50 millisecond return, or that you have a return of like the commit call in this instance, within 50 millisecond SLA, it is one of the like check boxes that they're going to evaluate on compared to other vendors, and it was industry leading, right? So like no other technology provider in our space could deliver that type of performance. And the in-lane performance is hugely important in winning sales, and also it's a key part of the customer experience for these retailers, right? They think a lot about the in-lane experience, and it's a big it's something that a lot of attention is paid to. And so we had to do it for one customer, and so then we included it in our pitch for other customers, and I think it was part of what helped us win sales.
And this is the ball game, right? This right here, this answer, this is the ball game. In the opening stanza, eventually gets to, and by the way, we just won Walmart, which in the United States is a huge customer to win, right? Very notoriously difficult to get in front of, very hard to win, huge expectations, high requirements for how you operate, right? Really hard to win. So that's enormous. But having it took too many words to get there. But this is a specific area of concern to our customers that is part of the RFP process, to which is paid little attention by any other company, that we decided to pay a lot of attention to, which is in-lane performance. And we're able to present a metric for that performance, which was industry leading, likely led to more sales. Yeah, that's what customer obsession looks like, is understanding their problems and delivering to them a thing that they didn't know they really cared about deeply. Right? Again, checkbox items have a really crazy way of becoming deal blockers when someone finally delivers on them, right? Because sometimes it's a wish list, right? It's the customer wish casting, like, I want all these things, and the various people that are going to put on RFPs can't meet all of those things, and there might be one or two items that just nobody does. But it turns out it's super important to not just that customer, but all the customers in the space, and no one has really made it very, very clear. To use Interview At as an example, when I started doing these mock interviews, I went looking online, predominantly YouTube, to see if anybody was doing mock interviews. And there were some that were structured, almost mechanical, and some were highly scripted and not really real. And then some were like conversations between, we'll call them junior to sort of mid-level people, but they weren't real interview questions. And it turns out from the comments that I get, email, WhatsApp, people are very creative in how they reach out to me, comments. I got a phone call from Cutter a couple weeks ago. That was fun. What people are responding to is the authenticity of the realness of the mock interviews and the feedback, of course, but it's not scripted. It's not fake. It's someone who is going through the struggle of trying to present in an interview content to win a job. And in this case, it's a superstar product manager who is essentially ad-libbing her way through an answer, which is not great. Her structure's terrible, right? But you can see the customer obsession just pouring through. All right, so she overcomes that problem. Totally great. Awesome. But the conversation we had with the tweaks and the pointers and the follow-up was like, hey, here's a bunch of things you can clean up that is going to make you present a lot better. Also then came with a warning of, hey, by the way, you're interviewing for an L6 job. You're not going to get that job. What is more likely to happen when you go in and finish your job interview? They're going to come back to you and say, yeah, you're over-leveled for the job, and we'd like you to reloop for a higher job. She didn't believe that was true. Turns out I was 100% right. That is the value of the mock interview, but also in understanding and just obsessing over what the customers want, which is delivering high-quality video, right? High-quality audio, improve my microphone, the video, the back. All of these things are in service to the customers who are watching these videos so that they can land their dream job. and delivering something which just didn't exist before, and understanding that. And I didn't fully understand the power of that. I thought it would be kind of important, right, doing these real mock interviews, but not really fully grokking it until you start getting the feedback from the customers like, yeah, this is way more important. In this case, that's what happened here with this candidate. It was a checkbox item until it wasn't, and then it became a deciding factor. Super important. Loved what came through here.
And so how would you ultimately measure the impact of this solution?
This specific functionality or the 50 millisecond
requirement? No. Sorry. The broader functionality. Apologies.
Yeah. So, I mean, the retail space, when you're talking about medium to large size grocery retailers, which was our sweet spot within the United States, you only have like a couple hundred, right? And so, and their contracts only come up, depending every 1 to 3 years. So in any given year, you're only really talking to maybe like, I don't know, let's just say 100. It's probably more like 50 or 75 retailers, but just for the sake of math, you're talking to like 100, right? So, previously, prior to having this feature, we were getting at-bats maybe like a couple times a year. Invited into a conversation, asked to submit an RFP. It was in the tens. It was in like the low tens of times we were getting invited. By a couple of years later, we were in most every conversation for retailers that were considering new service providers, and winning, like I said, 60% of those. I was actually in those conversations for a large majority of them because I was doing demos of this functionality, and I can tell you that it was one of for sure in every conversation, it was one of the top 10 things that was discussed in detail, and a lot of focus was put on. And I would say, in again, like the majority of this conversation, it was maybe one of the top 3 reasons why we were sort of selected, and what they were most interested in taking advantage of when we onboarded them and rolled them out. So it's difficult to differentiate in this space because a lot of the functionality is very like me too. And building this and being able to speak to it competently and demo it and talk about where it was live in market was one of the ways that we were able to grab and hold a differentiator that no other competitor could touch. And so it was meaningful within those conversations, especially with like the larger retailers like Walmart.
There's a lot to love in general about the answer. Again, I've stated several times, the structure was just not great, but the level of customer obsession here is super important. And there's a little bit that comes out in this last answer that I really want to highlight for aspiring product managers or even mid-career product managers who are wondering what really separates the talent. It wasn't enough to build the feature. It wasn't enough. She used the words competently speak about it and demo it, right? Focus on seeing around the corner. Right? The question was about delivering delight to a customer, right? Seeing around the corner. When you can do that, you're going to recognize what's working and you're going to lean into it, especially if it's a differentiator, right? The candidate talked about there was a bunch of Me Too stuff in the products that were available from competitors. So when you have a differentiator and your customers are responding to it, and you know this because you're talking to your customers, you understand your customers, you're having that dialogue, you're showing them the things that you're building and they respond in this way, then you hear how they're responding to it, and you adjust your pitch and you change your words and you modify not just yourself, the product manager, but then you're working with presumably an outbound sales force, and you're changing the sales decks and the verbiage that you're using. All of these things are kind of leaking through in the answer as to things that this candidate did, which are just phenomenal for a product manager who's aspiring to kind of grow their career and do more things, work on bigger, harder things. So just so much to love here. Absolutely loved it. So as I always do with these videos, I like to read the assessment that would have been read into the room for the candidate had I been on the hiring loop. And this is what I wrote for the candidate for our follow-up session. Customer obsession. Little discussion required here, save 1 point. It's easy to love customers in a space a candidate loves. It's another thing entirely to demonstrate customer obsession across wildly disparate verticals. The retail grocery business owner decision maker is very different than the rental property entrepreneur. Regardless, candidate demonstrated with a high degree of excellence that it does not matter who is the customer, candidate will know and understand them and build accordingly. So because when we do the mock interviews, we generally try to cover 6 leadership principles, and it really depends on how long the candidate talks as to how much ground we cover. But if you're watching this video, you haven't seen the other videos, you don't know that this answer that this candidate gave came out of kind of left field from a experience point of view, because they had spent a lot of time talking about working in a rental property management software company. So this didn't even come through in any of the feedback as I jumped into the video, because it wasn't relevant, which is this candidate is able to speak at a degree of depth of the various customers, and they are wildly different customers, right? The person who's basically an Airbnb property owner versus a grocery store owner, wildly different expectations, wildly different needs, much harder to identify who they are, talk to them, language, etc., and then figure out what they need and deliver great experiences to them. And that really for me was further highlighting as the interview progressed and we covered more ground in the leadership principles, just how much range this candidate had, and why my feedback to them was, hey, look, you're interviewing at the wrong level. And I myself would tell you that you've got to kind of reach a little bit higher than where you're targeting, which does happen even at companies like Amazon or Facebook, all the top companies. You may reach in and think, hey, I'm a this level job. Turns out you're not, right? Don't sell yourself short. And that's another reason why, having a mock interview with someone who knows what they're doing is helpful, right? Because you're going to get that kind of feedback. So overall, the candidate was amazing. Great customer obsession. Absolutely loved it. Lots to take away here. And, as I do more of these, please leave comments below, because I do get a lot of inspiration for other areas. And one of the things people said was they wanted more customer obsession, but also they wanted to see a good interview. And while the vast majority of mine are not great interviews, because it's people who need to work on a lot of things, and this is a case where a candidate clearly overcame an inability to structure their answer very well, it was still just such a great product manager.